so I think art just was a very healthy way for us to express ourselves and also just, laugh when things are a bit tough, or just give us a bit of stability, a cast of characters that was always with us, things like that. But we would kind of go off and just love this land of like improv and writing stories around these characters, and it was something that was kind of just for us. So things got like really weird, like there were weird stories, weird characters, weird sense of humor, and we loved it.
That is animator Kim Ferrari. And on this episode of Creative Mind, we're going to take our first deep dive into the world of animation and more on what it looks like to have a career as an animator, from freelance to corporate work. And Kim's experience is great because even before she graduated from school, she was working in Atlanta at Bento Box, finishing up her classes online, and finishing up her thesis project, Sisters, all at the same time. This is a great episode to really figure out if you've got what it takes to work in the world of animation. And before we start, please hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to so you never miss an episode of Creative Mind. Now here's my conversation with Kim Ferrari. Thank you so much for coming actually into our studio. It's been so long since we've actually been able to be in an actual room somewhat together, where we're separated by, I think, 12 inches of bulletproof glass, so we're safe no matter what. But you graduated from here, so tell me real quickly, what was your major here at the Academy, and how do you describe yourself as an artist?
I went to the Academy to study 2D animation, so I got my degree in 2D animation, and I feel lucky enough to be able to say that now I am, in fact, a 2D animator.
So what's the difference? I mean, I know the difference between 2D and 3D, but I kind of don't. So what's the difference between 2D and 3D?
Well, 2D is the more traditional look, where it's got sort of that pen to paper sort of look to it, and everything is flat in quotation marks, because of course you make it move and make it look as dimensional as you want, but at the end of the day it is flat. And 3D involves Maya and the more mature software to make it look
okay.
and actually be three-dimensional on screen.
That's all the math. So the 2D is the actual pen and paper, and then software. I'm assuming you're working more in software like Photoshop or Flash is dead. I'm sorry, Photoshop or something else.
Flash is not dead.
Okay.
Flash is very much alive, and actually one of the things that I wish I would have learned more at the Academy. I think there's sort of this rumor, I guess, that Flash is dead, but it's not. There's a ton of companies that still use it, and it's one of the most accessible tools out there. So It is dead in name because it's no longer called Flash. It's called Adobe Animate now. But it's it's alive and kicking, and it's what I use actually every day at work.
Oh, really? Really?
And what I used for most of my projects, and different jobs, ramping up to the work I do now. So because after graduating, I quickly realized that most companies were looking for experts in Flash. And so I put it on my resume, like, I'm an expert in Flash, and which I wasn't. I had almost never opened the program. And so I learned it because those who fell for it would give me the test. And then that would be, like how I just learned, what to do with it. And but I'm glad it turned out that way, because I think if I was to try to have learned it on my own, I don't know if I would have been able to do that, Like, it was really nice to have the time pressure, the stakes are high, and a clear prompt on what I had to do.
I told people I'm an expert. I have to be an expert on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole weekend was just me calling people and watching tutorials and things like that. So.
Well, that makes sense, because I think that's one of those resourceful things that I think so many art students have to learn is, you learned a lot of stuff, but you're going to learn a lot more stuff every year that you're working.
Yeah, totally.
Because, we're going to go through kind of your whole origin story and your history and all that. But, now you said you're working with Animate, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mostly. A little After Effects too, but yeah, mostly in the Adobe suite.
Okay. So tell me, you're working now at Khan Academy. I'll let you explain, what your new role is now.
Sure. So I work at Khan Academy now, which is a nonprofit that's all about providing excellent educational resources to anyone and anywhere. And their whole philosophy is centered around this idea that anyone can achieve anything, but the fact, or the reason I guess we fall behind in our schooling or whatever, is because there's certain gaps in our knowledge. So if we can go back in time a little bit and try and like fill in those gaps, then we can unlock our true potential, et cetera, et cetera. And
That's pretty awesome. That's a great ethos to
yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
education.
And it's definitely a feel-good message, and so it's very rewarding for me to work there. And an extension of this philosophy is that you can never start too young. So there's no such thing as just, having all those gaps filled at any point in time. So you can go as early as first grade, kindergarten, and already start filling in gaps in learning for different kids. So I have the privilege of working with the Khan Academy Kids team, and so we have content for ages kindergarten-aged kids all the way through second grade, and we continue to grow. So that's the team I'm working with now, and our product is an app that we built in a way that I think is very cognizant of the different things that parents are worried about, like screen time.
Right.
It's very ethical in that way. It actually kind of pushes the kids out and encourages them to
that's great.
put down the tablet. That's enough for today.
You're done.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
outside.
Very manageable, small bits of information. There's no ads, there's no in-app purchases, and it's free always because we're a nonprofit. And this app works in a way with an algorithm to sort of find where these gaps are in learning and fill it in. And so it tends to feed the kid, content that's engaging and fun, but also a bit challenging. And it's very adaptable. So a kid can be, up here in LSW or like their letters, the alphabet, and be struggling a bit with math. And it'll, try and balance them out and feed specific information. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's not necessarily an art creative app. It's an app that is focusing on early childhood education.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, and so I guess that was a very long answer to your question on how it relates to art. But where animation comes in is that the app will feed the user basically a lesson, whatever standard is they're presenting, with a short video that teaches the lesson, and then it's followed by a few activities and games or whatever so that the kid can practice this new standard. So me and my team do the animations that present each lesson.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, it makes more sense. Nobody wants to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
me.
So
You
it's
don't want to open up an app and see me going, "Hey, more watermelon."
No.
You done?
Yeah,
No.
we have a cast of 5 characters that teach all the content, and the videos tend to be just very small nuggets of info, so max like 2 minutes long, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. So for you as an animator, it was not the path has led you to now working and creating animation for a specific purpose,
Oh,
as
yeah.
opposed to just I'm gonna
Absolutely.
make a cartoon.
Yeah. That was an eye-opening sort of shift in my career, I think, because I started off very focused on how do I get into the traditional animation industry? How do I get to Cartoon Network sort of level things? How do I do cartoons? And then the more I sort of got out of my own head and into the real world, I realized, art is everywhere. It's always been everywhere. And just because we don't see as much of the traditional, maybe just, drawings scanned in sort of art, we still see art everywhere in infomercials, in marketing materials, on websites, educational things. Art is everywhere. So if it's a passion, I think there's just so many doors that are opened up to you. And yeah, there's so many different things to pursue.
So many people when they go to art school and then long time after, and that's what we kind of talk about on this podcast a lot, is not just, hey, I graduated from art school. Now what? It's I graduated from art school 15 years ago and I'm in a slump, or I'm not sure what I want to do, or I don't like doing this anymore. I don't want to make a website anymore, or the industry changed and you can't make a website anymore. For you, was that, when you said that was a conscious decision, what was kind of that turning point for you to go from, I want to make cartoons, I want to be an animator, to let's do something that helps people. Was there a big mountaintop moment for you?
Yes and no. I think quality education and accessibility is always something that I've cared about. So it was always something that was in the back of my head when I was going to college, because I went to the academy for grad school. So for college, I actually got a degree in urban studies. Maybe you can cut this out of the podcast. But anyways.
That's okay. I was almost a philosophy major.
Yeah. So, but I had this passion definitely for, how the urban landscape affects, education and different, what people are able to access. And I did a lot of work with the YMCA, after school things, clubs and tutoring.
You're one of those people that cares about people?
Yeah, well, I try. Yeah, I try. Even did some
on.
work in like foster homes and things. So there was definitely a point when I was going to school, and it was just always in the back of my head, like, I want to reach children, and yes, cartoons do that. Cartoons were a huge part of my growing up and things like that. But I was always curious, like, is there a more direct way that I can work in this kind of, this line of work? So that was part of it. The other part was that right after graduating, I sort of jumped into the turbulent waters of freelance, like many do. And I'm not going to say I wasn't successful, because I did manage to get quite a few contracts and different amazing, cool projects with great people. But I also came to realize that I think it was not for me. Yeah, this world of 6-month contracts and jumping from here to there, and I think also just being a bit replaceable, and just kind of like navigating that and planning ahead. I'm not always a great planner aheader, and managing the finances too. Like, I think last time we talked, I told you that
1099
taxes. Yeah, when you freelance, you just get the check, and you think like, this is a good fat check. I'm getting paid for my skills. But the smart way to do it is to put some money aside that you'll have to pay for taxes at the end of the year. So
and you will pay for taxes at the end of the year, whether you want to or not.
Right. And so that was a slap in the face. And then also managing things like health insurance and things like that became a little tricky for me. And there was always sort of that stress. I had Obamacare, which was great, but there was always that stress in the back of my head of like,
I've met who actually had Obamacare. That's
you know
amazing.
What? Yes. It was awesome. And it gave me great coverage, but I still had that little voice of dread, I guess, that if I were to get like a kidney stone or something,
sure,
like that'd be the end of it. Like that would be all my money.
Yeah.
So I wanted to transition into something that still let me pursue animation, how I, defined my own goals. I didn't want to compromise on that. But I started to look for an industry or opportunities that would provide me with a bit more of the structure of the more traditional full-time employment with the benefits and things. And so I was able to do that, and actually ended up getting a kidney stone, but being able to pay for it. So it was a big moment for me.
But that's kind of a brilliant way of, well, not kind of, it is a brilliant way of looking at your career. Because I think so many people, I want to be an artist. I went to art school and I had dreams of being a painter, and then never picked up a paintbrush after I graduated, because I wasn't very good. And you, after working, went, okay, this style, and I want to have you, walk us through some of those freelance works, just so people, can understand what freelance looks like. But for those of us who've worked freelance, like you said, it is like, all right, I got a 3-month contract, which means I got to find 2 more 3-month contracts today before I start my first 3-month contract, because God knows what's going to happen later, because that 3-month contract may end a week from now, because we just don't know. And then, making that conscious decision to go, well, I want a full-time job. How do I find that? And was that question is, when you went, okay, I want to be a full-time employee doing art, was it education was the main search, or were you looking in animation or in the arts in any type of full-time employment?
Well, I think it's dangerous to close doors, I think, as an artist. And so there's some parameters you can set, and then I think it's good, just as a a rule to sort of be flexible on many things so that you don't close any doors for yourself, because it's a very competitive industry. So yes, I was looking primarily in education because, like I said, I had had some experience in it, and some great resources and people who could point me in different directions. So that felt like the safest and most exciting way to go. But I also was, at the same time looking to see, what other jobs I could get, even in that more kind of freelance world, until I got there. And it was a very stressful transition, I'm not going to lie,
Yeah.
because up until that point, I think most artists can relate. It's just so reliant on networking and connections and just calling people constantly to see, I mean, like you said, to be able to set up those jobs that will come in the future while you're working on a job,
Yeah, it seems like that's the full-time job.
Yeah,
Is going
exactly.
out
It is in
meeting
many
people
ways.
and going and drinking with people and having dinner with
Yeah.
people, whether you like them or not, to go.
And updating that damn portfolio like every week. So, yeah, where was I going with that? Oh, so it was a stressful transition because suddenly I had to sort of drop those contacts and try and rebuild a different kind of network
wow.
base.
So to talk to me about that then, so let's talk about that, because I think that's, a lot of people we've talked to in the past are pointing out, that those two most important things, that it's a community and you need to network. Skills are like number 5, 6, maybe 10 in the top 10 things you need. It's like skills are like, yeah, you'll figure that out. It seems like, are you a jerk? Can I work with you? And do you know enough people to prove that you're not a jerk that I can work with you?
Yeah.
How does that work? How did you build a network from freelance, which is, we're all pirates on shore leave, to corporate networking? What were some of the steps you took to do that?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because what ended up getting me the job at Khan Academy was someone who knew someone who knew someone from the academy that was
really?
able to make that introduction. And when I went in for the first interview, I remember folks there, being a little bit surprised that that's the path that I took. But coming from the art world, that's the only way I knew how is, you don't go on LinkedIn per se to find jobs. Like, you call Joe, who helped get you a job last time, or the guy that you gave a job to last time, and see if he can repay the favor.
I'm calling in that chit.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. It was just I think it was just keeping an open mind too, and just, like I said, not closing doors, and just, just ask people, because you're right. I think art's not any different than a lot of industries where one of the most important things is that you're personable and you get along with people and you seem like a trustworthy, awesome person, So you're never really wasting effort just by talking to people, to be nice and just hear what they know, who they know, and what jobs are around. And, like, you don't have to plan it out too formulaically. I think just having that attitude usually gets you somewhere.
Truer words never were spoken. It's all, again, every time we talk to somebody, I always think back on, myself and other people I've worked with. Like, wow, that idea of being the solo artist locked up in your room in the dark, deep foreboding thinking and creating. It's like, no one's going to see your work.
No, yeah.
It's a shame.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I will say, too, that now I actually am lucky enough to be able to dig back into some of those contacts I used to have, because we're a small team. We're just about 11 people in the Khan Academy Kids department of Khan Academy. And my animation team is, filled with contractors, too. And so it's awesome. I get to work with a lot of LA talent, a couple of voice actresses.
Oh, very cool.
I should give a shout out to the Little Labs, which is a small but very kick-ass animation studio in Los Angeles that I get to work with, and some audio folks too. So I still have one foot sort of in the contract department, and I love it.
You get to be the person that go, yeah, she's on the corporate side, but she's cool.
You know what though, Bobby? I am cool, because
I know.
Because having had been there, I now definitely try and build out those schedules and timelines, like real Gantt chart, like very, very specific down to the very last detail, because I know how stressful it is, to not know, like, okay, in 2 weeks will I have this job? And I love to be able to say, yes, you will. You will have this same job in like 2 months or whatever. And this is exactly what you'll be delivering that day. All this stuff has already been approved and we have the money for it,
Feel
So,
free to
yeah.
get that kidney stone.
Yes.
You're going to be fine.
Exactly.
It'll pass. Don't worry. It'll be okay.
When I woke up this morning, I didn't think we'd be talking about kidney stones, but
Neither did I, but you brought it up. You brought it up.
And you'd be surprised every time I bring it up, someone else in the room chimes in and says, oh my God, I've been there.
Now let's talk about some of the flashy, cool, fun, I am an animation expert type talk. Your claim to fame at the Academy was you had this great award-winning, adorable short. So talk to me about Sisters, this great
Aw.
animated short you did.
Thank you. Sure. It's a bit of a throwback. Sisters was a short movie about two nuns. One was Mother Superior, and the other one was a much jollier nun named Sister Catherine. And they had to find a way to, despite their different personalities, get along and see eye to eye. Otherwise, they'd basically die. So, so that was
of all good kid stories.
Yeah. It was zany and it was just a lot of fun. And it's called Sisters because of the nuns, obviously. But I also worked on the project with my twin sister, Kiara. So it was also about our sisterhood.
So when you decided, okay, I'm going to become an animator. I'm going to be the person that makes cartoons. And I'm going to say cartoons not in a disparaging way. Cartoons
I love
are
it.
awesome. It doesn't matter your age. I think in your top 5 shows, 2 of them are going to be animated series at this point.
Yeah.
I think I finally got my wife into Rick and Morty, which may be my downfall. But what was that choice for you to go, I want to become an animator and then come to the Academy and learn this? What prompted that?
Well, I think that goes way back because, like I said, I got a twin sister, and that was always something that was part of our world was art. And I think it gradually became animation is the most tangible way to tell a story. So that's how our art evolved into animation. Because I think growing up, we moved around a lot as a family, and there was just lots of sort of turbulent, crazy times. And so I think art just was a very healthy way for us to express ourselves and also just, laugh when things were a bit tough or just give us a bit of stability, a cast of characters that was always with us, things like that. And we just loved, it was more than art though. I think for a while, our main passion was the storytelling. So we would just fall in love with, characters from a show or whatever. We barely even had to know them or watch that many episodes, but we would kind of go off and just love this land of like improv and writing stories around these characters. And it was something that was kind of just for us. So things got like really weird, like there were weird stories, weird characters, weird sense of humor, and we loved it. And art became sort of the way to share those stories and make them tangible and make them, like really keep them and not just have it be a spoken word that, evaporates eventually. We still love just drawing them out. And then animation was the next step to that, was actually being able to, move those stories and tell the story better. And there were lots of summers. I always have to bring up my grandma when we talk about why art, because she played a big role in it. In the summertime, my whole family would go over to Italy, because we're from Italy, and spend summers
life.
there.
Really terrible time. Going to Italy in the summer.
It's a lot of pasta.
Really rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we would spend summers with our grandma. And the family would kind of like separate. We have 3 grandmothers. So, the kids would kind of disperse and we'd kind of have like our alone time, with grandmas. And it was a lot of fun. And so it was usually like me and Chiara and my older brother, Giacomo. There's 5 of us. But the 3 of us would stay with one grandma for the majority of it. And so it would be just months in a small apartment without internet in a city called Udine. And she kind of lived out in the outskirts. and we couldn't even really use the phone, because it was international rates.
Sure.
So my point is, we're just kind of stuck inside for most of the day, just left to our own devices. And how do you battle boredom? And so I think that was kind of where the explosion of creativity came for me and my sister. It's just the two of us, and we loved just making these stories and animating things. And so it was always something we wanted to pursue, and we didn't think of it as a pipe dream either. We thought like, yeah, we can do this. And, being surrounded by grandmothers who are just so loving, like, of course you can do this.
And I mean, the horrible scenery of Italy.
Yeah.
That must have been terrible. I mean, all this art everywhere. It's like, oh, just get it out of my face. So you were in, what was the name of the city?
Udine.
Udine. What province is that in?
It is like an hour drive north of Venice.
Okay.
So very northern part of Italy, next to Austria.
Okay, wow. So you had the nice rolling green hills.
Oh, yeah.
Running around in the mountains and foothills. Real terrible time. And how many summers did you have this horrible experience?
Well, I mean, I won't say my age, but every summer, basically, of my life.
You're 19. I know that. So that's okay. We can put that out there. But every summer? Oh, man.
Yeah, more or less every summer.
Yeah, we can't be friends because that's not good.
Hey, I have all three grandmothers still. They're still around, so come anytime.
That's great. So when you came to the academy then, what did you have to learn to become an animator?
I had to learn, of course, a lot of the foundations, I think, because for the longest time it really was just a very zany, weird expression of, whatever I wanted. And I didn't have a lot of the structure and the foundations of, the anatomy of things and et cetera, et cetera. And so that was really fun and also very intimidating to be there, and be drawing live, not with a computer or whatever, but big piece of paper with a Sharpie, drawing what's in front of you while the teacher watches. That kind of experience was very
in the
beneficial.
Animation department, you guys were drawing with Sharpies?
Yes, because Coco was really into that because
Diana Coco Russell.
Yes,
yeah, really.
Yeah. She was really big on that because I think it's very convenient to be able to hide behind a Cintiq and Photoshop, and all those animator tools that let you erase. And so she kind of wanted to get us all out of that shell and say, like, look, first and foremost, if you want to be an animator, you got to know how to draw things. And so we'll step away from the computer and learn how to draw things.
But with a Sharpie, that's...
Yeah, you can't erase a Sharpie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know, everyone takes the anatomy class and you have to learn how to carve your chalk and get your pencil sharpened the right way, and then you can rub it off. But when you said Sharpie, I was like, wow, that's commitment.
Yeah. She would call it the big bad marker. Get out your big bad markers.
That is a spot on.
People cried. Yeah.
Diana Coco Russell impersonation.
Yeah.
And people crying, I'm sure, happened quite a bit.
Yeah.
So after that, after you learn how to now name clavicles and patellas and all that fun stuff that all cool artists get to do, you were still focusing on 2D animation. And what did you learn then from your experience with sisters and upon graduation to go, okay, this is the path I'm going to go? What were some of the things that you learned and it pushed you to go, great, I'm going to be a working animator?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I should say, too, that I decided to do 2D because it felt more accessible to me. Because, like I said, I had gone to school for urban studies. Once again, delete that.
No, it's staying. People need to know you're a human being with heart. There's only so many people like that.
So, for me to take that leap into the art world, it felt like a bit too daunting to go straight into 3D, which, on top of the foundational skills, you also needed to know software and be comfortable with it. So I went into 2D, and that was the next step, I think, to making it, actually doable to be able to get into the industry, was learning the software. And luckily for me, I think 2D animation software is, it definitely can get complicated and it's evolving all the time. And there's just so much that we can do with it. But I think at its foundational level, it's mostly still reliant on the artist and less on the software. So if you're a good artist and you know what you're doing, then it's a lot easier to pick up a tool like, Animator or After Effects and things like that versus Maya. But that was still a learning curve, so that took a while in my schooling to get comfortable with the tools to be able to actually make the dream a reality.
Okay, that's a good piece of advice because I think that's there's a lot of people we meet when you're working in creative fields. It's like, you know how to draw, but you don't know what this does. And then there's the other person. He knows how to make this work, but he can't put two colors together.
Yeah.
And finding that happy mix is so rare.
And I'm biased, but I think, I think the foundational piece is more important. Get comfortable with the colors and the anatomy and what you're doing. And then, don't think of the tool as a daunting thing. Like think of just train that tool to work for you. Right. Is kind of what you're doing.
Right. A hammer's a hammer. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me about that first week. I'm free. I'm freelance. I'm going for jobs. What does that mean?
Earlier I said I'm not good at planning ahead, but I actually got my ducks in a row while I was graduating. I was kind of lucky enough to be able to have had with my sister there too, we really planned out our time management and stuck with it, which I think is difficult to do. And it's a thesis project that's all your own and you really want to change things and kind of go off your own script and timelines and all that kind of stuff. We actually stuck with it. So I finished the project like a couple months before graduating. And so I had that time built in to kind of look for work. So I actually was able to find a job, my first job down in Atlanta before graduating. So I went down there and ended up kind of finishing my classes online. And so thankfully I didn't have to sort of deal with that stress of post-graduation and like, oh man, it's cold out here and I don't have money for heat. What do I do?
Walk us through then that journey of being a freelancer. I mean, I know there's good times, bad times, but what were some of those things you learned, some advice for students or anybody working in that world? So you had to pick up from, the Academy of Arts here in San Francisco, and then you got to go to Atlanta, and that had to be a bit of a change, for lack of a better term. What's the harder part? Moving down there and finding a place to live or doing the work?
I think the hours are very stressful because I think especially in your first freelance gigs, but honestly in any of them, there's a ramp up, and a learning curve for every project because every studio wants to do things a little bit differently. And factor that into like a very short 6-month contract. Most people can't afford to have 2 months, ramp up out of a 6-month contract. So you got to be ready to go, week one. And so that was really stressful for any freelance project, but especially for the first couple ones. So when I moved down to Atlanta, I think I moved down there like the work started on Monday and I moved there on Friday, found an apartment Saturday, and then Monday morning, and remember, I didn't know the software that well either because I may have exaggerated on my resume a little bit. And so I was thrown into this world where it was just, it really is dog eat dog and you got to keep up and really, dive in. And so then it became difficult because it's a balance between that network, and that network is what's going to get you the next job and so many afterwards. So you have to try and figure out how many hours do I want to devote to networking and how many hours do I want to devote to the actual craft, and all those hours add up to more than 24 hours, I think, in a day. So for that first job, for example, a big lesson I learned was that I spent most of that time trying to learn the software and really kick butt at my job, and hit all the deadlines and everything like that, which, I can't blame myself. I think that was the most important thing for me to do. And I wasn't able to do as much of the, talking to people, networking with these people, who do you know, things like that, because I was actually pretty lucky. Most of the people in my team were not from out of town. Most of them were from Atlanta, and they got quite a big, animation scene down there. So they did know people, and they laughed when eventually after the 6 months, we were all kind of given the boot. I remember one of the dudes kind of like chimed in like, oh man, this is the third time you fire me. You'll be back, kind of thing. And, we all kind of laugh about it because it's nothing personal. It's the industry,
right.
I'm not pointing any fingers. So then once that contract ended, I sort of found myself in a bind because I didn't think that I had made enough of those connections to really get the next job. And so I sort of applied to those same jobs that everyone else was applying to in the area, but without the added benefit of like, hey, remember me? I saw you a couple weekends ago to, at this thing or that. Or, hey, I'm really good friends with this guy. So, like things like that.
Check up on me. Don't look at this piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's slightly puffed up.
Yeah. And, I wasn't able to say like, hey, Elizabeth told me to come over here and talk to you. So, so no success for me finding a job after that in the Atlanta area. I think all the positions kind of got filled from others in my team. And so then I was kind of back to square one and drifting around. I came back to the Bay Area because I wanted to be here, and did a series of other freelance projects. I did even just some like short animations for a hospital. I worked for a company called Epifio that does animated ads, and they're a great company actually. I recommend them to freelancers out there because it's kind of like an Uber culture where you put the check mark in when you're available. You can take it out anytime, so it's easy to balance your time. And they'll have a project for you at almost any time. So once you're in, But you don't have the benefit of, working with a team. You're really just a solo person. And, there's someone else working with you in Washington and somebody else, from Portland. But you don't even talk to them. It's like through one mediator. So that can get kind of lonely pretty quick. And that's kind of how I felt. So it was a great job, but I thought of it, as something I could have while I looked for something a bit more stable. I also had a chance to work with a company called Ghostbot in Daly City, so pretty local, and they're a great bunch of people. Didn't stay there too long either, unfortunately. Just some shows got cut and things like that. And after that, I worked with, did a little super short little gig for Titmouse. That was a lot of fun for their Vancouver studio. And then for another Vancouver studio called DHX, which is a service studio. They do a lot of shows for Netflix, DreamWorks. They're a great bunch of people too. And so I was lucky enough to work on Peabody and Sherman show, the little reboot on Netflix.
When you started working freelance, and more for the idea of, when you're working freelance and you put your shingle out there that says, I'm an animator. What are you doing as an animator when you're working freelance? I want to assume and hope that you're always making the coolest characters, but I know that's not the answer. What are the types of work somebody can expect when they're starting out in the animation field? What are you actually doing?
Well, if you freelance for a larger company, you will just take care of the animation execution piece, and they get very detailed. Like you have a month to do 1 minute and 10 seconds of animation. Here are all your files, your rigs, your artwork, everything. Go.
Wow.
So that's like the one side of the spectrum. And then I think the farther you get from the industry, into maybe like that job I did for a hospital, for example, things like that, or smaller companies, your job might vary a lot more than that. So you might be also doing, the rigs or the artwork.
Okay.
Et cetera, et cetera.
So you're not. So it may be you're doing parts of a whole as opposed to see all that on screen. That's me.
Yes,
Okay.
of course.
Okay.
No, it's more like, hey, do you see that guy in the back that just waved? That's my guy. I did that.
The wave. That's mine.
Yeah, you gotta work your way up to those like detailed scenes. I think when I was working, so in Atlanta, I was working with Bento Box on a show called The Awesomes, which is a Seth Meyers show that was on Hulu for a couple of seasons. And yeah, that was my first job. So, of course, I'd tell people and they would go check out the show or whatever and kind of ask me what I did. And I remember my last month there, I finally got like a scene that was, that actually meant something. So I got like that final end scene where all the characters are hugging. And that was awesome. I was like, I did that. Do you feel the emotion in that scene? But before then, Seth Meyers, the whole like kind of SNL sort of, humor had just a lot of like quirky characters and just like random things in the background happening. So I did a lot of just like that bird was mine. Or, you know, that smirk from that character in the back. That was me.
That was me.
That was me. It took a month and a half, but looks pretty good, huh?
Yeah, that's the part of animation that I'm jealous people can do it, but at the same time it seems like that just seems like the patience you guys have is otherworldly.
But that's why the networking thing I think is good, or just getting your art out there is really therapeutic in a way, because you know you spend hours at a computer and you just end up crying over like, oh my god, this like his nose just doesn't look right in this like breakdown shot that is on screen for like 0.2 milliseconds.
3 frames that
Yeah,
no one will
that
ever see.
nobody will ever see. And you just get in this zone where you just think like, my career is over. You know, like someone's going to see this. I'm on a list at DreamWorks because of this nose. Like I'm just never getting in any of these companies. So it's kind of a relief to be able to, you know, just talk to other people, show your artwork, you know, like A, it has the benefit of someone might know somebody. But B, I think it's also like reminds you what you do it for. Like someone will laugh at the scene, you know, like, oh, that's a great shot, you know, or whatever. And, you know, no one's going to bring up the nose. And it's kind of nice.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think a lot of different art forms, I know a lot of photographers, you know, they never look at your work. They never look at other photographers' work. They go, oh, I like that little shaft of light.
Choose
you
good
added
friends.
in there.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah, that's probably, yeah. So choose good friends, exactly. Yeah. Network and get people that are not horrible. Influences. What were some of your influences for animation? What should people be, you know, this is kind of that advocacy question for animation. You know, you're 17, 18 years old and you go home to your mom and they go, I want to make cartoons. And then they go, no, that's not a job. What are the influences and what are the things that you can point to or have people take a look at and go, no, this is something really good. This is important work. You looked at an animation and just went, wow, that's great stuff.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of awesome influences in my life. And if I look way back, I think, you know, there's a difference between technique and style too. So there's different things that I look at that I'm like, wow, I love just the principle behind this, the storytelling behind this and all that kind of stuff. And the animation can be good or bad, you know? Yeah. So there's the substance and style piece, and then there's the technique piece. And of course, the gold standard is the ones that can do both. So I remember, well, one that I really love that I tried to reference a lot for my thesis work too was Samurai Jack. Had a huge crush on him growing up. And they just did, I mean, so much of that show is silent too, you know, and it depends so much on the shape language and the color. And so I find that I can just, you know, pull up any episode of that and get inspired in some way and, you know, and find some valuable information from that show. So that's definitely a favorite. I'm thinking back, and another big influence for me in high school was the Gorillaz. And their music videos just like blew me away. And so I also think that music videos are a great thing to reference and look at too, because they tend to just be a bit trippier, I guess is the best way to describe it.
You
know,
got
like
3 minutes, go nuts.
Yeah, they push the boundaries and they do stuff that you don't see on cartoons or movies because it's not sustainable. You know, it's usually pretty experimental or strange or whatever. And so that's like a great way to, you know, get some inspiration too. I loved like Feel Good Inc., Clint Eastwood. I remember it just blew my mind when those came out.
You know, there's so much good animation out there. For someone like you, who this is your business, do you prefer animation or do you prefer live action?
Wow, you've backed me up into a corner because I think me personally, as an adult, this surprises people, but I don't watch that many animated shows.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't think that that says anything about animation per se, because I do love to revisit and I still love to watch music videos and things like that. But in terms of shows, like if I'm just sitting down on Netflix watching a show or a movie, I actually tend to prefer the live action.
Well, now you've ruined my question.
Yeah, I might have just ruined my career. No. But in my mind, I think that's what drove me to kind of go into doing work for kids. Because when I was a kid and growing up and during all those formative years, the animated stuff was just such a life changer for me, and it impacted my life in so many ways. And so I wanted to be part of that, and I don't think it's a shame that now I've kind of transitioned into watching more live action things and whatever else.
You're working in the corporate world. You have to be doing some personal work. So what, tell me, save that last question where you don't like cartoons anymore. Your words, not mine. What kind of personal work are you working on now?
In the personal work goals arena, I'm mostly excited about doing more projects with my twin sister because I still think it's very fun to collaborate with her. We live in different cities now, so it's a good way to keep in touch and also just dive back into that world of just weird self-expression and things like that. So I'm always looking forward to the next sort of project I can do with her. And we're actually thinking of revisiting some of those, old notebooks and things from when we were kids, just to laugh about it and
Sure.
See if we can
saved
make
all that stuff?
I think I need to give a shout out to Mauro and Paolo, my parents,
Yeah.
for holding on to all that stuff because
They
I
have
think
the archive locked away?
they do in Burlingame,
wow.
California, in a storage unit. Because otherwise, I think I would have just thrown the whole thing out. So now that we've had enough distance from it, we're thinking of revisiting, and that might be a very big next project.
Oh, wow, that'll be so cool.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome. Okay, last piece of advice you can give to somebody. Well, I'm thinking, okay, I want to be an animator. I'm serious about it. What do I do?
I think dive in and make yourself available, I think, because there is a tendency as an artist to just try and hone your skills before you put your vulnerable self out there. And I think the biggest growth comes from just taking that leap and knowing that there's a learning curve, and so what? So what if the first 2 rounds don't go that well? You're going to learn a ton from them and keep building, and it's going to give you a leg up the quicker you can get used to just, having fun with it and talking to people and just seeing where everything leads.
So there you go, a quick tour on the world of animation and a quick tour on following your dreams long enough to find the right job for you. And if you've ever dreamed of a career in art and design, more and more of those career opportunities are on the rise, especially animation. Employers are always on the hunt for the next generation of talented and skilled creative professionals. At Academy of Art University, you will get the work-ready skills that employers want. You can study anywhere in the world right now with our online programs, and of course, downtown in San Francisco. To request more information about our 40-plus areas of study in art and design, including game development, animation, UX design, and more, just visit our website at academyart.edu/creativemind. I'm Bobby Brill. Thanks for listening.